Today I want to talk with you guys with something that's been a really meaningful part of my life and that I think could be a meaningful part of yours as well. Let's talk.
Subscribe now.
So I think that there's so many different things that you can gain from living in another country, but I want to talk about just a handful of them today. The first one is adventure. You know, so many of us are stuck in the same physical space, and when you're in the same physical space, you're really limited to the types of things that you can do. In every culture, in every country, there's different things that people might go out and explore and experience. But trust me, if you move to another country, there's going to be so many new things that you're able to do. For example, for me living here in the Philippines, I've got to do things like island hopping, where you just hop on a boat and you go from island to island throughout the day, just experiencing totally remote, beautiful areas. I think of a recent trip to El Nido where I just saw some of the most stunning island imagery that I've ever seen in my life, and I'll never forget. If I hadn't lived here, I wouldn't get to experience things like that. And there's just so much more when it comes to living in another cultural. There's the Sinulog Festival that was just here in the Philippines, where, you know, when I first attended a few years back, was just the biggest event that I ever had been in. I remember just walking down streets with just tens of thousands of people, and there's just so much that is really part of that was incredible to experience. And I think that adventure is something that human beings are created to have more of. And it's so easy if you stay in your own country to stay within your same habits. And I think if you stay in your own country, you're really just bound to have the same habits and the same experiences. So get out of there, experience some adventure in another country. Another thing that I think that you can really experience if you live in another country, especially if you do for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, believe me, the time goes very quick, is personal growth. I think that there's something about being in a similar physical space, being in the culture that you feel most familiar with, that makes it harder to actually just kind of grow, because you have to overcome the habits and the customs and the traditions that you don't even think of because you take for granted. You're like a fish swimming in water, and you kind of got to jump out of water to see the world in a fresh new place. So I think for me, living here in the Philippines, there's just so much that I thought I knew about myself that I really didn't. You know, I used to think that I was always patient, always would seek to be kind, and here, there's just so much that I experience that takes out the impatience in me, and that occasionally just kind of makes me a bit angry. So living in another culture is going to bring out all kinds of emotions, you know, all kinds of things that are going to really help us grow as people. You know, the longer I live in the Philippines, the more I start to see things through Filipino eyes. But it takes even that much longer to be able to really adapt, to be able to grow, and to just think through issues. You know, who is the person that I want to be when certain situations happen in life? You know, when there's adversity or struggles, or when there's good times, you know, how do I want to respond? And I think that living in another culture highlights so much. In a recent video, I talked about how this year I want to be less trusting, less giving. I never thought I would say stuff like that. But the reality is, living here caused me to rethink things like boundaries, how I respond to things, and especially how my actions, even with the best of intentions, can produce opposite intentions with people. So if I hadn't lived in the Philippines, I would look at these things a lot different. I think as well of, you know, previously living in Australia for 10 years and how much that really impacted my life as well. So many other things that I loved about the culture, didn't like about the culture, and if I hadn't lived there, I wouldn't have had all those experiences of growth. Another great reason to move to another country is career or business opportunities. Now, when it comes to the Philippines in particular, so many people feel like, listen, you're stupid to start a business in the Philippines, or you're crazy if you think that you're going to find another job over there as an expat. But both things have a little bit of truth to them. It definitely is a challenge to start a business here, to run a business here. There's so much with work culture that is really so different from especially Western work culture. But there are great opportunities here for business in the Philippines if you know where to look and you take some time to really think through possibilities. Also, there's definitely opportunities here as well, working at companies that are specifically looking for foreigners to be a part of things. Are jobs in plentiful supply for foreigners over here? Nope, they're not. So you definitely got to go hunting. But even just last week, I met a new friend. We caught up for some tea, and he's been living here for a while, managing a big team at a overseas company that has a big office here in Cebu. He's doing very well, very successful, making good money, and there's definitely opportunities like that for career growth and business opportunities if you know where to look. Next thing that I think makes it so worth it to go to another country is experiencing the culture. So I got to think back to when I lived in Australia, and it brought up so many different thoughts. I mean, most of the Australians that I was around had things about the US that really rubbed them the wrong way. In Australia, they talk about tall poppy syndrome, where somebody just kind of sticks their head up a bit high, or is a bit arrogant or overconfident, that they just like to kind of chop them down to size. And so Americans, for Australians, really epitomize that tall poppy syndrome. Now, I think that they also, had really a misunderstanding of just how diverse the US can be. Not all Australians, but definitely in 10 years living there, I had more conversations than I could ever remember with Australians that just kind of felt like every single American, was kind of like, John Wayne with the gun in his, holster and, super right-wing politically and, on and on. And the reality is there are Americans like that. However, there's also so many Americans that are the opposite of that and everything else in between. And that's what you find when you go to other cultures, is that there's so much more diversity than you expect. And that's what I'm learning here as well. When I first came to the Philippines, I really felt like my overall experience of Philippines culture and Filipinos was pretty much, the same. But the longer I live here and the more I'm really fortunate to get to meet more and more people here, the more I see how much complexity there is in Filipino culture, the way people think, the reasons why they do things, the type of personalities here. And it's really hard to put in words, how rewarding it is to experience truly meeting people from other cultures. Culture impacts all of us just so deeply, and it really takes getting outside of our culture, outside of our comfort zone, to realize how much there is in the world around us and how much we could experience and really learn from other cultures out there. Another reason for moving to other countries is the cost of living. I think back to living in San Francisco before I was here, and just my cost of housing for a month, I could live on in the Philippines for probably 3 months, 4 months. Just the cost of housing. And that's to live, really well over here. So I think a lot of people are starting to see that you could really enjoy living in another country, still working remotely or whatever opportunities are out there to work in country, and being able to save up, not having to stress as much about finances. Definitely if you move to another country, including somewhere like the Philippines, you certainly got to think out your financial plan before coming out here. But if you do, I think that there's great benefits to cost of living in another country. Very related to this, I think a lot of people consider moving to other countries because of their retirement. Maybe they didn't have as much as they would want to live in their own country, and so more and more people are deciding to live as expats in other countries, so their retirement will go a lot further than it would if they were still living in their own country. There's a million more reasons why I could recommend moving to another country, but just one more that I'll mention here is safety. You know, when I moved to the Philippines at first, a lot of my friends and family said, you know, you're gonna be safe over there in the Philippines. And the truth is, I feel so much more safe here than I ever did in the US. You know, there's been a lot of situations in the US where I felt like I was in a lot of danger. I haven't even one time felt in any danger at all in the Philippines. That said, there is danger here and there's danger everywhere. The difference, I would say, between the US and the Philippines is it's mostly pretty obvious when you're in danger in some way in the US, and those things are a lot more invisible here in the Philippines. However, I think overall it's just a far safer place to be, and there's so many other countries where the crime is just so much lower than it is in the country where you may be in today. So these are just a few reasons why I think it's really worth considering living in another country. I wish that every single human being would just take a year out of their life to go move somewhere else. I think the world would be just a completely better place, a different place, if people just were to get out of their own culture, even for a year out of their life, and just experience the world through somebody else's eyes. It's so rewarding, it's so enriching, and I think that it just has blessed my life and helped me grow so much over the years. You know, I've lived almost 15 years now in other countries, and I love my own home country, but I can't imagine wanting to move back there at any time in the foreseeable future. So let me know what you think on these thoughts. I would love to get your comments below, and as always, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Have a great day.